And with that, I want to introduce our speaker. So what we'll do this morning is Patricia Berry will share for about 20 minutes, and then we'll spend the remainder of the time in small groups reflecting on how we integrate these ideas in our organizations, how they apply to the challenges that we're facing, and the ways that we want to shift our approach to our work. So Patricia Berry is a consultant, fundraiser, possibilist at Patricia Berry Consulting. New has had the privilege of working with her over the past year and a half or so. And she just continually brings these kinds of what if questions that completely reorient the way that we are framing our work, our challenges, our hopes. And so I am so excited that she is here to share with us this morning. Patricia, take it away.
Thank you. So Hillary, I just want to double check. How many minutes do you want me to take to talk about things? About 20 minutes?
Yeah, we'll look to transition about 9:32, maybe.
Perfect. I'm going to try my best, even though I love to hear all my words. I'm going to try my best not to talk that long because I do want to give you guys some good breakout sessions. Yeah, I'm Patricia Berry, and I'm going to admit first and foremost that I'm a recovering institutional fundraiser. So for about 35 years, I have worked in huge institutions like the University of Michigan, like Columbia University, like Fordham University, and organizations like that, doing really deeply transactional fundraising. Through that, 20 years in that business, certainly learned some things, but also got very tired of it. I really wanted to transition to something that felt a little bit better, that wasn't so awash in fear. And, so when I started my business about 3 years ago, I really continued to dig deep into what is the why behind my fundraising, and what is the why behind what I was beginning to identify for myself as really problematic things about the way that we were raising money and sharing wealth. And so New has been a terrific partner, and also just a place that I have learned and begun the process of dismantling my own white privilege as I, enact my fundraising work. I'm an alumna of the Champions for Change program, which was really transformational for me, and have just continued to really look to New as a place to kind of learn and dig into some of these ideas. So I'm really delighted that that they invited me here to speak. So I'm not going to be able to solve this for you in 15 minutes, how to fundraise with a liberation philanthropy mindset. So I thought I'd just kind of put some things down and let you begin the mulling process, right? So anybody can be a fundraiser. Me, socially awkward, I had to learn how to deal with humans. If I can learn how to be a fundraiser, some of the best fundraisers that I've worked with have been, one of the best fundraisers I ever worked with was a tax lawyer who was, you wouldn't look at him and say, you're going to be a great fundraiser, but he was just really dogged about it. And he was very focused on the work and the doing of the work. So with that said, what I can say about everything else that you're going to do past this, wherever you are in your fundraising thing, it's just the practice, just do fundraising and you'll make fundraising happen. And one of the things that I find that organizations do not look at first is how they're fundraising and how their fundraising embraces their values. Fundraising often becomes something that's very separate. Like we do fundraising and we do asking for money in a very different way than we live our values. Maybe we're a social justice organization, but we aren't necessarily fundraising with social justice values because somehow sharing wealth feels different. And so my question for myself and in the room today is, what if you did knit those together? What if you did knit together your organizational mission and values, and you use those things to also raise money for your organization? You know, in the social justice space, that's liberation philanthropy. And this is a term that I first heard, it may have been used before, but I first heard it by a practitioner named Sydney Hargo. And he's president of Philanthropy Network of Greater Philadelphia. Interesting guy. I've read a few of his articles, but he talks about liberation philanthropy. And that really spoke to me as a person who is kind of steeped in Jesuit practice. I was educated by the Jesuits. They brought me to Buddhism, which I'm a Buddhist practitioner. And I loved a lot of the concepts that were kind of rife in that whole Jesuit value system of liberation theology, right? So that's me starting to bring together my personal values into the way that I fundraise and begin to unpack that. So one of the things I want to talk about today is going to be literally a little love letter to somebody who I find really inspirational. And you'll find we have the links for this, so you don't need to write it down. But there's a woman named Cindy Suarez, and she wrote a really great book called The Power Manual. She also is, you can go ahead and head to the next slide, Hillary. So the Power Manual isn't necessarily about fundraising, but I would say it's all about fundraising, right? We need to think about how those power dynamics play out in how we ask for money and how we do fundraising in a way that it has to be very foundational to our work. And so I think these next couple slides are really just going to be me doing a little love letter to Cindy Suarez, who also is editor-in-chief of a wonderful fundraising group called the, I've totally blanked on her name, Cindy Suarez, oh, Nonprofit Quarterly. So that's another, we have the links for that. But Cindy Suarez, in her work, The Power Manual, really kind of broke open for me how I wanted to talk and think about philanthropy, to think about that exchange of power. And my background in fundraising, one of the things I could never figure out is why, as fundraisers, we were always so scared, right? We were really afraid we were going to screw up the ask. Somebody was mad because they wanted to do the ask and you didn't ask for enough money, and I said the wrong thing and that donor wandered away and I somehow broke the relationship. And it took me a long time to really realize that that actually is power imbalance, that there is, if something's so breakable, it's because you feel like you don't have any power in that situation. So that was kind of the beginning of me starting to poke at, why do we fundraise the way that we fundraise, right? So transactionally. And some of the things that I started bringing to my clients was start to think about how we are really creating power imbalances, which the donor centrism was one of those, like the donor is always right, the customer is always right. My what if question for my clients is, what if you're interviewing donors? Hillary, if you can move to the next slide. What if you really took a look at how that your fundraising is creating that power imbalance by going through that fearful scarcity mindset, right? I think that's where the fear for me gets unpacked, right? If we're in organizations that we feel like it's so easy for me to screw up as a fundraiser, or I'm going to get in trouble, or I'm going to lose that donor, or I can never say no to money. That's scarcity mindset, you know, and that is really a hallmark of an imbalanced power dynamic in your fundraising practice. So what if we really start fundraising a little bit more without limits and really started to think about unpacking that And Hillary, if you can move to the next slide. Unpacking that towards abundance consciousness when we're fundraising. If we're thinking in abundance, and if we're thinking with kind of liberatory power dynamics in our fundraising practice, then we can say no to things. We can say, not right now. We can say, that's not the right donor for me. We can say to a donor, we only fundraise for the general fund, because your restriction on that fund, that $1 million that you want to give us, is actually you expressing inappropriate power over my organization. So switching to that is hard, right? Because I really want to honor the fact that a lot of times I work with organizations, we're just trying to keep the lights on, right? I need this money because I have people that I need to pay and I have work that I need to do. So I want to honor that, making the transition to kind of an abundance mindset, a liberatory power structure, also comes with risks. So far, those risks have paid off for the organizations that I work with. I can't guarantee that it's always. And it's a very fearful thing because you're bucking, if you really think about the current philanthropy landscape, that's really only in 80 years of practice, right? So we've got 80 years of this weird tradition that we created about the customer is always right, or the donor is always right. And we always write handwritten thank you letters, and everybody gets to put their name on a building. What did we do before that? Certainly, as the practice has become formalized, we have started to think in fundraising that we can't say no to those things, that we can't do it a different way. And you do place things at risk. But my question to you as an organization is, are you willing to essentially shut a door, right? To begin to think about how those power dynamics are creating either an abundance mindset or a scarcity mindset. If you're feeling fear as both a fundraiser or an executive director, I'm not going to say that it's always scarcity mindset, but I'm going to say it may point to scarcity mindset. It did for me. Hillary, if you can move to the next slide. So I really work with my clients when we first start our work together about who do you say no to? And how do you say no? When I was coming up through the ranks in institutional fundraising, you never said no. Never. Nobody would ever say no to money, because me as a fundraiser, I was incentivized to always say yes. I didn't even really care whether it was good for the organization, because I was getting ranked, reviewed, promoted, and paid based on how much money I brought in, regardless of whether it was good money or bad money. That is the core of really problematic slippery slope power dynamics, right? So my liberation question for organizations is, how are you giving people the thumbs up? How are you incentivizing people in your organization who are really doing that critical work about wealth exchange to say no to things that they should be saying no to? And I think particularly in the social justice space, it's an act of resistance to say no to somebody who's coming at you with $3 million that would change your life. And they want to use that $3 million to enact their own agenda on you, right? I need you to create this fund. It's going to do one thing for this one particular kind of person that I really like. Here's the $3 million. The people that I want to work with who would say, that's not my mission, I'm going to send you down the street to somebody else who it's a little bit more their mission, but that's not for us. That is, oh my God. I don't know if any of you guys are having a little clinch as I say that, right? When I say no to $3 million, oh my God, that would be life-changing. Again, it's scarcity. Not being able to say no is scarcity. Being able to say no is expansion, is you can live a value that really changes minds and changes hearts. So I'll just tell one little story and then I'm going to send you guys off to kind of reflect on this. I had a client kind of early in my practice, and we had talked about this power dynamic and interviewing donors, right? So that power dynamic of the donor is always right, and the donor gets to come in if the donor says they want to come in, regardless of what I think and feel, and regardless of what my mission is. And she was at that point as an executive director that this money that she was raising was keeping the lights on, was paying the staff, was doing the stuff. Like, she really carried both of those weights, right? I want to be a liberation fundraiser, but I also need to pay attention to my bottom line. There's things at stake. And so she went out to coffee with a high net worth individual who, you know, here in Southeast Michigan, this individual gets hit with a lot of asks. So she asked this person out to coffee, and they were having a great conversation. And she noticed that the individual was starting to get like a little short. And so she just reflected on it. She said, you know, I'm just noticing that it seems like you're getting a little frustrated with this conversation. Can we talk about why? And so what the woman said to her, what the philanthropist said to her was, I'm just waiting for you to ask me for money. You know, that's the point of this, right? And she said, well, it's the first time that we've met. I am fundraising, but I want to see whether we are right for each other. That's what this conversation is about. I think she blew that philanthropist's mind in a good way. It may have been a bad way. You know, it may have been a philanthropist who was like, dude, if you're not just going to come and ask me for money, then what are we doing? But she expressed her power in that moment about, I don't need to ask you for money until I know that you're right for my organization. So that was her showing that abundance consciousness, right? If I shut this door because you're so fragile in the relationship space here that you'll be annoyed with me just being a human in this conversation, talking about exchanging wealth, then I'm not the right organization for you. And this is not the right relationship for me. I don't want to bring that into my ecosystem because my staff and me are not going to be afraid of the people who are donating to us. We get to be humans, right? Sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we own up to those mistakes. If this relationship with the donor is so fragile and breakable, it's not the right relationship for our organization because we will not be fundraising in fear. The PS to the story is this person came back with a significant gift, loved the relationship, and they had a very, sometimes a tuggy relationship, you know, because this individual wanted to create restricted funding and wanted her to do events in a specific way. That she said, no, we don't do events like that. We do celebratory events. We're not going to do fundraising events. You know, the fundraising happens here so that we can talk about whether we're a good fit for each other. And the individual weirdly loved it. And I guess I shouldn't say weirdly, that's kind of a value judgment. It was surprising to them because they rarely get met that way. So that is at the core. Is she the flashiest? Is this executive director the flashiest fundraiser I've ever met? Absolutely not. She's just like me. She's awkward. She's weird. She doesn't know how to deal with humans. And it is a constant, I see Chris laughing at that. Chris has met me, Chris McMullen, that she just shows up like herself and has transparent conversations about money. And if it doesn't work out, everybody's gentle and walks away. So now I'm going to stop talking because really it's the least interesting thing about me is all my talkingness. And Hillary, I'm going to ask you to move to the next slide. We're going to send you guys out into your breakout rooms. And I really want you to consider a couple of questions, right? Think about who in your fundraising practice never gets told no. Really think about who that person is. And it could be a whole host of people, right? You know, often it's the donor never gets told no, but there may be other people in that. And now also think about who never gets to practice their no? Right? Who is a constant recipient and never a person who is having an equal power exchange in your organization? And I'm going to hopefully give you enough time that think about flipping that. Think about, what if you disempowered that person that only hears yes to be something that's a little bit more like in conversation? And then what if you empowered that person who never gets to practice their no? You know, what would your fundraising practice look like if you institutionalized that and made it part of your value set, part of your stated you know, goals as a philanthropy organization? These are the values we live by.